Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing. I'm host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. And I get to delight my listeners today with a new friend of mine, Deb Drummond. Hi, Deb.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing really, really great. And I said delight because I have felt like every time I have a conversation with you, it feels like I walk away more delighted. And I think that has something to do with not just the kind of person you are, but what you've chosen in life to do and to serve. And you did send a little brief bio and I found it online. So I'd like to read that.
All right.
Okay. Deb Drummond is an international entrepreneur. We'll talk more about what that means. Network marketing professional, private coach, motivational and top performance speaker, multiple #1 author, podcaster, mastermind leader, health and wellness, anti-aging expert. And guess what? She inspires to inspire. And that's why I've invited her. That's what I feel like my purpose is inspiration. And that's who I bring on for you, my listeners, to meet and get inspired by.
Well, thank you. What a pleasure to be here. Isn't it interesting? We both have the same initials. I just put that together.
D. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, mine kind of happened later in life. I was DH, Dr. Doreen Hamilton, and then I got married and I already had a book. I already had so much out and I just thought, oh, I better keep my old name. But I really love Downing and I love the alliteration, Doreen Downing. So that's a quick short story about mine. As long as we talk about names, anything about yours, Deb?
No, interestingly enough, I was born Deborah Backer. My father's name was Backer, and my brother's father's name, we have the same mother, different father, was Drummond. And when my father and my mother separated, I was quite young, 4 or 5. And my mother walked in my room and said, your dad's on his way, and you are now going to be Deborah Drummond, because back then it did not seem right to have a single mom with 2 kids with 2 different last names. So my last name got changed and it was Deborah Drummond. But my name is Deborah Backer, and I was married for 17 years to a gentleman named Baker. So good thing I didn't change my name, or I'd be Deborah Backer Baker. Little funny, but
it is funny. And isn't it interesting that of all things, we started with our names, and already you mentioned something about the divorce. And I would say my parents divorced when I was about 4 or 5 years old. So I always like to start as a psychologist. What were those early influences on voice? You know, having popped out, usually it's like, yay, you, and we get, well, not usually, but the best case is that we get surrounded with mirrors that say we're fine, and sometimes we don't. And so anything you have to say about finding your voice or not having a voice early in life?
My background in terms of having a voice is interesting, because my grandmother, who I had a lot of respect for, her name was Barbara Brown, and she had a very bellowing voice. And most of the grandchildren, so I would have been one of the grandchildren, right? She had 5 children. Those 5 children had 9, of which I'm one of, and then we've had 27. So we've kind of gone the opposite way. But most of the cousins, my cousins, were like, if my grandmother said something, they would like, okay, just stop. You know, she had the word. But for some reason, I don't know why, I would challenge her. I'd be like, sit down. Like, and she'd be like, I just had that ability with her. She was strong-minded. She had these incredible stories. when she said something, she meant it. Like there was no, like, if it was done, it was done. And I just and I aligned with that. So when it came to with my grandmother, I had a lot of voice, and I was used to standing up for that voice. And in school, I would stand up for that voice. But my early days, I didn't. I had, my mom was a single mom, and there was, there was not from my mother, but there was some violence in the family dynamic. And so I was brave but scared. That's what I would say. I was brave but scared for most of my childhood until I was 16, and I stood up to that family member. And it was a day they probably never forgot. And it was the day that I felt like I got my freedom.
Oh, this is
So,
fabulous. Wow.
mhm.
I just already, I'm totally captivated. And if you wouldn't mind, and if it's not too personal, I'm sure people would like to know just a little bit more detail about that kind of, I know you said violence and you said not your mom, but there was
Yeah,
something and someone. So let's just go there if you can.
yeah. Well, it was a sibling,
Oh.
and an older sibling, and it was physical violence.
Mm.
And so I really fought. And this sibling was apparently had issues with me from the time I got brought home. So I think it started quite young, and it was picking and just picking on and jumping out of closets and scaring. And then it got pretty physical pretty fast. I would say in my early years, I had to fight back to stand up for myself. And so again, it was really interesting. My mom did what she could do. There's all sorts of dynamics that were going on in my mom's world. Siblings fought, but not necessarily. This would almost be like two brothers duking it out from very early age, and it wasn't. You know what I mean? So there's one boy, one girl, and pretty well probably from the time I was 2 is what family members tell me. So
Oh.
there was a lot of fighting, protecting.
Mhm.
Yeah, just a lot of fighting, learning how to fight back. So again, it's a very double-edged sword where
Yes.
no, my voice wasn't heard
Mhm.
because there was just dynamics going on, and there was only one parent to hold the house down. And yet it definitely affected my esteem, and it definitely affected my self-love and those kind of things that make it hard to speak up later on. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, and I'm so glad you went into a detail around his sibling. I haven't heard that as much. It's usually parental, because you could understand a child having a new one come in to their space, and there'd be kind of psychologically some kind of resentment, but then to have something that is actually acted out on aggressively feels like I think that other people who are listening today can go, yeah, that happened to me too. I had a sibling who was mean.
Mhm.
But 16, wow, something happened. You stood up and you said that was the day that changed your life.
Yeah, I think we all have those moments in our life where enough was enough. And I guess that was the day
Mhm.
that a fight started and it changed. Let's just say I won that battle,
Yeah.
and enough that they never came near me again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you became more full-bodied grandma.
Yeah, I became embodied with, and again, I think we all come to places where it's enough's enough. So I learned how to fight back in all those years of having physical violence.
Mhm.
And I became able to fight for myself,
Yes.
and it made my sibling go, okay,
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to win this one. As I talk about this story, it's kind of like those shows where they're like, go fight the bully. And if you beat the bully, those high school shows from back then, it's like
Yeah.
if you go against the bully and you win against the bully, then everyone else leaves you alone. It was that kind of moment, I think.
Oh, and you're talking about empowerment too, aren't you?
I didn't know that day was coming. I mean, we don't know these days are coming, right? And it was just
Uh-huh.
like,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Was it also physical?
No, it was always physical. I would say it's 90% physical. There was the teasing and like walk by me in a hallway and push me kind of thing when my mom didn't see, or those kind of undercurrent
Mhm.
things, but it was always physical.
Mhm.
Mm.
Well, I hope that he found some more grace in his life and was able to find a
Yes.
gentle spirit to show up in
No. There's been conversations since then for sure, and apologies and what have you and that kind of thing.
Oh,
Mhm,
fabulous. Oh, good, good.
mhm,
Well, already we're learning how you embodied a more powerful you. And I think that says something about voice along the way. At 16, you found a voice, or your more empowered voice, that from then on was with you, because it felt like you had taken yourself to this new empowered place.
mhm.
And that's what people need to have. I keep coming back to embodied sense of self that they can. And that's what you did. You just showed us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So moving through life, becoming somebody who's more confident to take on anything, and look at all those awards I read and those achievements. And it feels like what you said about standing up to him, your brother, it feels like you achieved something that day. And I think that's also learning something about how to make something happen in your life, and that you certainly learned how to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, I mean, who's to say? Because we don't know the impressions that things make upon us psychologically until they become found, I think, I obviously didn't go from that day to not having to work things out, talking to some people and having some counseling and understanding some dynamics and understanding forgiveness and empathy and all those things that come along that ride. I've always had this visionary brain that can see grand scale things. It's almost like an architect, right? I think my brain's very architectural in terms of, like, I always say I have a Rubik's Cube brain. So if you put a project in front of me, I see the whole project. Like, I see like the 5-year plan, and I see this in different places. It's just kind of how my brain works. But I'll tell you, that experience, I think one of the things that I got from that, I'd rather not have had it, but if I had to pull something from it, it certainly falls in the resilience category. Standing up for myself in a way that I may not have ever had to stand up before, and having empathy for other people that have gone through that experience definitely added to my resilience bucket, because it was a solo journey. My mom was single parenting. My mom didn't see 90% of what happened. It would be when she came home from work or something like that. She also did her best to navigate it, but didn't know what to do either.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that you just said about resilience in looking at how to reframe a situation in life, and I think that's one of your teachings also, is help. I mean, if you inspire to inspire, it feels like that's
Yeah.
the message today for folks, is that whatever the situation, whatever the trouble, whatever the struggle, that there is some nugget you can look at and see how it helped you become more of the who you are meant to be. So moving on into, looks like more young adulthood, and I guess school and achievements. What comes up to you about moving into adulthood, and what does that mean about finding voice to you?
Interesting. Moving into adulthood. So my latter teens, I guess we would say, as we're coming out of high
Yeah.
school, that kind of thing. I would think I was kind of known for someone that had maybe, I wouldn't say a unique personality, but I wouldn't say I was quiet, but I was also very respectful. Like, I've always had great respect for people's position, like teachers. And so I think I was well respected by teachers, and I, in turn, gave great respect back. I can't say that I was in top academics. My love was always in the creatives. So in art, I would have an A on my picture, and I'd only drawn a little bit of it. I loved photography. I did a lot of track and field, and I just loved the arts. I loved social studies. I loved science in sense of learning new things. So I really had the places where I was selective, but I started to really fall in love with music. I think music has been my healer through many things. I remember the first time I put on a Janis Joplin album that my mom had pearl. And so I think I really started to fall in love with music in my latter years. I definitely was with the club that loved rock music because I just loved rock music.
Yeah, you and I had a conversation about Janis Joplin. I had just read
Mm,
something about her on my blog about how talking about finding your voice. And of course, not everybody wants to go out on a stage. They just want to be able to raise their hand at a meeting or at a dinner
yeah,
table with a large extended family, be able to express their own opinion or their truth. So I
yeah.
would say that looking to people who are more expressed like through music and
Hmm.
lyrics have a lot, I think, are like what, poetry and art there
Hmm.
for you.
Yeah, I think that that's probably where I would experience a lot of my emotional healing, my inspiration. Again, I wouldn't say I was quiet through school, but I would answer questions in the back of the room. But I also was that teenager that, I mean, I think I don't know other teenagers, but I definitely had my own issues of self-esteem and am I good at this? Am I good at that? And like just all those things, right? And like, oh, that boy likes me, but I like him. All those things that happened in school. And I don't think I really found myself and fell in love with myself and found out who I was much years later after school. Do you know what I mean? Like all of the things that happened from childhood onward didn't show up in ways that were not serving me that I needed to explore on. I think I had a lot of fun in high school. I had great friends, like really great friends. Like we all were very like-minded. And when I look back, we all kind of had some similar wounds and we were very much camaraderie for each other and a circle of safety.
I love that phrase, circle of safety. You also
Mhm.
just said something about the breaking through later in life. And I'm going to take a short, brief break right now because I want to come back and hear much more about the breakthroughs later in life that you've had and some of the accomplishments.
If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com.
Hi, we're back now with Deb Drummond, and I'm having an exciting time talking to Deb about her life, her history, and some of the early struggles she's had that have made her into who she is. There is a word that sticks with me from our earlier conversation, and if you didn't hear it, go back and listen again. It's about resilience. Any kind of life, it feels like when you've had some kind of struggle, you can still learn something, and that's one of the things that Deb learned. Hi, Deb, we're back.
Hey, nice to be back. Thank you.
So the breakthroughs, because that's so exciting to grow into adulthood and then become more aware and then to become not just self-aware, but more self-realized. What would be
Mhm.
some of those examples where you feel like you broke through, found a new voice, and had more self-realizations?
Wow, I think there was quite a few.
Let's take one or two.
Yeah, let's take one or two. I think when I made the decision to go from working in the music industry and living that kind of nocturnal life, which is super, I mean, honestly, it was just such a blessing in terms of that camaraderie because you are working different schedules. And you got to think we're not talking yesterday, we're talking a time ago where it was very different. But I think when I made that decision to leave that industry and go into personal development, I mean, the self realization happened in a multitude of ways. The first time I read the book that changed my life, Shakti Gaiwan, Living in the Light, and I got insight into things like energy and I was having this relatability going on, and I fell in love with holistic medicine and fell in love with massage and aromatherapy. I mean, it was a very different world, and it was like this constant plethora of just, it was euphoric. I just really went down that path. I went through, oh, honestly, a 10-year journey of personal development. I mean, it was just one layering, understanding, course, group, workshop, book.
I so
experience.
understand. I got a PhD in psychology, and I think that was the reason, is that I just wanted to have lots of opportunities to put myself in growing situations. So I totally,
Mhm.
I love that other idea that you just presented to folks out there, is that there's so much opportunity out there to heal and learn and grow, and all the way from aromatherapy to past lives counseling to anything. All you have to do is just open your eyes. And that feels like what you did. You awakened.
Yeah, it was really in making a decision to shift from one industry into almost not knowingness, because we're talking 30 years ago, right? So there wasn't yoga available. There wasn't aromatherapy stores available. No, when I'm talking massage, I was like massage therapy. There wasn't holistic massage or rebirthing. There's none of that. Like, it was like the real discovery of that. There was even the idea around counseling or inner child or John Bradshaw, The Shame That Binds Us, and all that stuff that came waving out in that era. It was just really new information. It was newfound information. And it was quite a journey to read it and start to have identification to that. We didn't really even know where to go with it at that point. It was just really information and what could we do to start to heal ourselves. We didn't even talk in that terminology, but it was an eye-opening experience for me. And it really started some inward journey questions, right? Like, how do I want to live? And who do I hang out with to do that? And what class do I take? All of that just took so long. And then I fell in love with massage, and I opened a private health studio in Vancouver. My work was my muse almost, right? Like, it really became everything that I did all day long. So you can imagine, I work in candlelight, I work with crystals, I work with aromatherapy from morning to night. It was pretty cool for 27 years. So that itself is its own healing journey for sure.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. And to me, when I sit with people, that inner journey, what you're talking about, those inner journey questions, and that fascination I have with people and what goes on inside. Not only that, but the jewel that lives within each one of us. So I definitely love what you're talking about when you're talking about these healing modalities. So I'm going to move into, because we're coming to close to an end, and I want to make sure people understand what you're doing nowadays. You're talking about number one best-selling author and all of this, and a podcast, and I'm going to get to be on it next month. So tell us about anything that's currently going on for you and how people can find you and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that opportunity. I think the biggest project that we have going on right now is multifaceted. And I have to say, while I've been sharing this journey with you going backwards, the journey that I'm on right now with creating this massive, it's a pretty big project for International Women's Day. It's the solidarity for women and those that support women. It is on the inside 450 women authors and speakers getting on stage and words on page to create a remembrance around International Women's Day, and that we have this day that we can celebrate. And that's a huge, huge project. If you want to talk about resilience and creativity and duration, because it started May 2023, won't end till May 11th, 2024, and just all of everything that it takes to put on something, and it's televised. All those multiple pieces came from my years of being an entrepreneur and came from really understanding resilience and compartmentalizing and all those things that you learn when you learn about yourself. The podcast that we're talking about, my podcast is called Mission Accepted Media, and it really is a platform for people that have taken on the mission, whether that's philanthropy, nonprofit, profit, businesses, projects, people that said yes for whatever reason. Not everybody goes, oh, sure, right? It doesn't happen that way. You take on the mission, and then why stay on the mission? What is it about the mission? Yeah.
Yeah. You hear me going, yeah, girl, right? You're right.
Yeah.
So excited about what you're sharing for people, and the fact that this podcast will be produced, but it'll be closer to the event. So that's going to be wonderful. I think early January it should be out, and people will hear more about the International Women's Day. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been going on since March 2023. We're 8 out of 22 summits in.
Uh-huh.
So your podcast will be January, right as we're getting very geared up for International Women's Day.
Yeah. Well, Deb, before we close, make sure and let us know how we could find you.
The easiest way to find me, because everything is there, and including a contact page, is debdrummond.com. So debdrummond.com has this beautiful contact page. It'll take you to deb@debdrummond.com. And that's where people can find me. If people are looking for the podcast, it's there. If you're looking for the projects, if you're looking for the books or whatever it is that we've got going on, you'll find us there.
What about one last share that you'd like to make for the topic of finding your voice for people who are listening today?
You know what? I found my voice many different ways before I braved up. That's what I call it, right? There was times where I had voice that I could talk to somebody, and there was many times that the only person I felt safe enough to talk to was myself. And so if you're at that stage or a place where you've got something going on in your life, in relationship, you've got a job that you're going to that you don't like, and you're probably having a conversation with at least yourself, which is probably who you feel safe with. What I did is I tried to answer myself as kindly as possible and love on myself as much as possible, so at least I could make moves or decisions. The other place that I found safety and was able to come up with answers was journaling. I found my voice through page on paper, which is why I'm a huge believer in books. Huge believer in books. If you have a chance to be in one, be in one. It doesn't have to be mine. Just be in one. I think it's a really beautiful journey that you go through when you put your own words on paper. So writing, and then for me, finding my voice, a lot has been singing. I sing every single day. I've probably sung Amazing Grace thousands of times to myself. Walking around my house. My kids like, enough already. So I found my voice and found healing of having my voice at a time where for sure sharing my voice was a dangerous thing to do, or I felt it was dangerous. And hang out with women that are frigging cool. Hang out with men that are frigging cool. People that will cheer you on, that will like inspire you and motivate you to make you feel like you can share their voice. Sometimes it's through TV, sometimes it's through movies. Like, where do you get your gumption? Like, where do you get your gumption from? And double down in that. That's my message.
Oh, I love it. And this last one was about being witnessed. And I feel like today I am witnessing you, and all my listeners are applauding you also. Thank you so much for sharing your bright spirit today, Deb.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having on. I know that people say that it's such an honor to be on, but truly it is. Like, it is an honor to be on someone's show, and vice versa. Like, it really is, because we truly, as cliche as, we just don't know. Like, I remember hearing a sentence or reading a page, and it literally 30 years later has changed my life. And I think anytime we get an opportunity to share, we're called upon. Like, this was the first time ever on a show or anything I've ever talked about that experience at home.
Yeah.
You know, so it is what it is today, and no one makes those decisions, and I let them roll, but someone needed to hear it. I'm not sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think it all comes down to one word I think that we're leaving with today too, which I know you said resilience, but was brave.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, my dear.
Yeah, thank you, brave spirit.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person Doreen interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.